Let everybody finish shuffling in here. Before we begin class, Brother Dennis is going to lead us in a word of prayer. So if you would, let's bow together in prayer.
Heavenly Father, just so thankful for bringing us out tonight to learn more about your word. So thankful for Brock and his efforts in studying this class and leading this class. And we just ask that you continue to give him the wisdom and that he needs to present this lesson. And we can also have wisdom in learning from what he is teaching out of your word. And we just ask you to be with all those that teach the truth, and especially in this place at this time, and grateful for that, grateful for the scriptures that give us the direction we need to go to better serve you. And we just ask you to continue to bless us, forgive us for our wrongs. Again, so thankful for your Son, and it's in Jesus' name we pray, and amen.
All right. So last week we finished up Exodus chapter 8. We're going to move into chapter 9 this evening. And I know most of you are probably going to laugh at me, but my goal is to get into chapter 11 tonight. We're going to do our absolute best. We're going to give it the old college try, okay? So chapter 9 begins with, and chapter 9 will be one that we're going to kind of move through quickly because we see a similar pattern. So chapter 9 covers the 5th plague, the 6th plague, and the 7th plague. Anybody know what the 5th plague was? Death of the livestock. What is the 6th plague? Boils. And the 7th plague? Hail. Yeah, so with those three in particular, we see a similar pattern. The Lord tells Moses what's going to happen next, tells him to go talk to Pharaoh. He goes to talk to Pharaoh. Pharaoh doesn't believe him. Then the plague happens. So we see with the plague of the livestock, all of the livestock of the Egyptians died. But once again, we see the separation here between the Lord's people, the Israelites, and the Egyptians. None of the livestock of the people of Israel dies. We talked about this last week, how with what we will see going forward is separation between how God's people are affected by the plagues and how the Egyptians are affected. We see that again here with the 5th plague, with the death of the livestock. So Pharaoh sends for him, but his heart continues to be hardened, and he does not let the people of Israel go. Then the 6th plague, which is boils, happens. We see the same thing happen. Pharaoh hardens his heart again and does not let the people go. Then we get to the 7th plague, which is hail. And we see this pattern once again. God tells Moses to go present to Pharaoh, and it's a little bit more of a lengthy exchange, beginning here in verse 13 of chapter 9. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Rise up early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, Let my people go that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues on you yourself, and on all your servants and your people, so that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. For by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth.'" We see God here say something a little different. He says, "I'm doing this so that you all will know who I am. But just so you know, I could have struck you with pestilence and wiped your wiped your entire nation off the face of the earth. So we see a little change here in how God is asking Moses to present these requests to Pharaoh from God. Continuing on in verse 16, he says, "But for this purpose I have raised you up, to show you my power, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. You are still exalting yourself against my people and will not let them go. Behold, about this time tomorrow I will cause very heavy hail to fall, such as never has been in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Now, therefore, send, get your livestock and all that you have in the field into safe shelter, for every man and beast that is in the field is not brought home will die when the hail falls on them." Then whoever feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh hurried his slaves and his livestock into the houses. But whoever did not pay attention to the word of the Lord left his slaves and his livestock in the field. So we see God present this to Pharaoh a little differently. But then we also see a kind of a difference in his warning here. He allows an opportunity here for even the livestock that survived the 5th plague and the 6th plague, because the livestock were also affected by the boils. He says, if you guys have any livestock left, if you leave them out in the field, this hail will kill them. But I'm going to even give you an opportunity to bring your livestock in so that you can save what you've had left. And I think that this is maybe a good example that you can go and you can show those who may challenge us on this idea that the God of the Old Testament was unloving and unmerciful and unkind and unwilling to give anybody a chance. I think you hear that a lot, but you can see here that not only has Pharaoh had 6 chances, more at this point. God's given him the benefit of the doubt more than 6 times. And so this time, he gives him the benefit of the doubt again, even to the point where he's warning them and allowing them a chance to save what they have left. And so God tells Moses to cause the hail to happen. So the hail comes down, and the goal of this was to, it says, it struck down every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. So this plague was basically giving the livestock a break and was attacking the crops and the trees and all of the food-bearing plants. But then again, we see in verse 26, only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, was there no hail. So God continues to now show Israel through sparing them his power. So this happens. Pharaoh calls Moses and Aaron in once again. He says, "This time I have sinned. The Lord is right, and I and my people are wrong. Plead with the Lord, for there has been enough of God's thunder and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer." So once again, we see Pharaoh put up this facade of, I'm willing to yield here. But as we see at the end of chapter 9, verse 35, so the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people of Israel go, just as the Lord had spoken through Moses. So once again, we see the same pattern. Even though we see a little bit of a break here, maybe, it still happens. So any thoughts or questions or comments on chapter 9 before we move on? Debbie?
I just wanted to mention that this plague, these 2 plagues, even the one with the hail that affects the animals, was not just random, that the Egyptians held those animals in high regard and a lot of time worshiped them, So God is constantly kind of attacking their gods with these plagues. And I think that's important to remember that it's not just these random plagues. God has a plan,
Right.
and he's making a point.
Yes. Yep. He's attacking their not only their livelihood, their ability to make their food, their ability to do work, but a lot of those things were, as Debbie said, they were protected by their so-called gods. They had gods for fertility, gods of the Nile, gods of agriculture, those types of things. And so, yes, all of these plagues are attacking these different things. Oh, yes.
I'm not sure if it's that he was giving him the benefit of the doubt, that God was giving Pharaoh the benefit of the doubt. He knew, in fact, what he would do, and that it was hardening his heart.
Yeah.
But I think what it was is it was giving Pharaoh and the Egyptians a chance to see how good God can be, how good he is. Like, he's warning you, bring your animals in. He's giving them the chance to avoid that. So I think from that perspective, I'm sure even Pharaoh's people were like, hey, why don't we just bring them in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
No, I appreciate that thought, because that actually brings up a thought that I just had. God says that he is doing all of these things for the benefit of his people, the Israelites, and for the Egyptians, to know who he is, to know that he is the one true God. He's all powerful. But you have to think that possibly we focus, when we think about these plagues, we focus on the power aspect and the ability for God's plan to be taken care of regardless of who stands in his way, right? Or if someone is showing defiance to God, what God can do to change their hearts. But Shelley brings up a good point. What if he's also using this as an opportunity to show himself as merciful, as willing to give chances, as willing to look past what has happened in the past and give continuous opportunities? And we see that with us, right? God continues to give us opportunities, even though we're not perfect, even though we sin. And so, what if? Just a thought, but could it be that maybe God's also using these opportunities to show himself as merciful and gracious? Oh my. Okay. I think Stan's got the next one, and then David, and then we got other hands. Go ahead, Stan.
Similar to what's already been said, but it does seem like God's extending his mercy to the Egyptians in this sense, that they can find protection by trusting him. Mm-hmm. Seems like the heart of God for both the children of Israel as well as some that would be counted among his enemies is to bring them to faith. Mm-hmm. If they responded and took their cattle, gave their cattle cover, in a sense, they were exercising faith that this God was a God of his word. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting how that has played over even into the Gentile era, that we become his children by faith, and it's simply trusting that his word is reliable and can be depended on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Stan. David?
Yeah, throughout all these plagues, you notice that Pharaoh, of course, his heart is hardened, but he thinks that he can give in, and he tells them to go to the Lord and take it away, and he'll let the people go. But then after the Lord stops the plagues, then he turns around and turns his back, and so it's this way through every plague.
Yep. Yeah, we see that as a constant pattern through everything. All right. Okay, Tara and then Melissa.
I think too that when we're baptized into water, we are baptized into him.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That is the way that God has given us to become a part of his church. Yes, Tara. Melissa?
Going back to what you were saying about how he's showing his character of his mercy, anytime God or Jesus shows us what they are, they're showing us what they want us to be. And I look at that and I think he knew exactly what Pharaoh was going to do. And how many times do we say, well, I'm not going to give that person another chance because I know what they're going to do. But we actually don't know what somebody else is going to do. God does, and he still gave another chance. And even if we did know, love demands long suffering. Love demands multiple opportunities. And it can be so unthinkable to us to do that. And yet we see God doing that because he loves Pharaoh. Even though he's probably incredibly frustrated with him, he loves him, knowing that he's going to keep hardening his heart. But he doesn't ever stop giving him that chance.
And I can't help but think that maybe that lesson is something that he is trying to show Moses through this also. Because it's a trait that Moses is going to have as a leader, and we're going to see that further on down the road. Russell?
I think, we have the luxury of sitting here today and reading about what happened then and being able to judge these Egyptians on whatever they're doing because we know the whole story. But it does just kind of show the abstinence and the stubbornness of humans, everybody really. I mean, it's the Egyptians this time, but not only in Pharaoh, but there were still people that didn't bring their slaves in and their cattle in after seeing all the plagues up to that point. They still didn't believe it was going to happen to them, and even though God gave him a chance, he didn't stop the plague either. He still had the plague come, even
Right.
after giving him the chance.
Thank you. All right, were there any hands left? Oh, Wally? Yours went up after the time was, I'm just kidding.
Back in verse 14, the Lord is telling him that I will send all my plagues on you yourself, letting him know that I can do all of this. And then he kind of eases up a little bit. Now, this is what I can do, but now if you'll do this, we basically work together and everything will be all right. But I don't see how anybody could be so dumb after all that plagues that go ahead and still say the same thing.
Yeah.
I know it's God's plan, but
Well, and that's part of what we talked about last week, where we see this constant battle for the will of the Israelites between God and Pharaoh. And Pharaoh didn't want to lose that control, and he also didn't want to be viewed as anything other than God's equal. And so that was sometimes stubbornness can cause us to overlook that stuff for sure. Robert.
If we look at the history of Pharaoh, we kind of see why he's so stubborn. In the time of Joseph, because of the famine, the people of Egypt sold themselves into slavery to Pharaoh. Pharaoh owned the population. Now, the Pharaoh at the time of Joseph was not so arrogant as this Pharaoh. The Pharaoh that preceded this Pharaoh thought he had the power to kill the Jewish people by executing their executing their newborn children. So their arrogance had grown with each generation. This Pharaoh is the ultimate. He is killing the children of God, and he has enslaved his people. So when there's a famine that destroys the livestock or destroys the crops, he's okay, because some of that survived. He's going to eat good. Even though his people starve, he don't care. So he has the ability to be stubborn because he has the mindset that he owns these people, and they're nothing to him.
Good point. Thank you. All right. Got to keep moving. All right. Chapter 10. So chapter 10 is going to cover the 8th plague and the 9th plague. And what is the 8th plague we see? Locusts. And then the 9th plague is darkness. So much of the same here. We see Pharaoh being warned of the eighth plague of locusts. But we see something different happen that we haven't seen yet when this plague is foretold. Let me see, I can't remember. Oh, here in verse 7, let's look here, chapter 10, verse 7. It says, "Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, 'How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined?' So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. And he said to them, 'Go, serve the Lord your God.' But which ones are to go?" Now we'll move on. We'll get to that in a second. But finally, someone else speaks up. It seems that after this plague of hail, that someone was hurt enough that they speak up to Pharaoh and they say, "How much longer are you going to let this go on? Your country is ruined." And maybe this is a case of just what Robert was talking about. Pharaoh doesn't know the difference. He doesn't recognize that. He's eating good every night. But his servants are now coming to him and say, "Your country's ruined. We don't have anything. We don't have plants. We don't have livestock. We don't have, we struggle with pestilence all the time." And so it's this comment by this servant, or by these servants, that causes Pharaoh to bring up his next compromise, as we'll say, to God's request. Does anybody know what that request was, or that compromise that is offered by Pharaoh? Katie?
Are you talking about with the locusts or after that?
Before the locusts happened, right here.
So he said, no, but you can let them in.
Okay.
Just the men, just not all your herds and your women and children.
Yeah. So God's request is that all his people and all their belongings go into the wilderness 3 days to worship him. And at first, Pharaoh's first compromise, we talked about that last week, was, okay, well, you can worship him and serve him, but you got to do it inside the land. And that didn't work. And so now Pharaoh's willing to make another compromise. Okay, you guys can worship your God, you guys can take that journey, but only the men can go. What do you think the purpose of him just sending the men to go might have been? Right, so they would come back, okay? You've left all your possessions, you've left your family here. So even though I'm allowing you to do that, I'm still maintaining this control, right? I'm still maintaining this control of you guys by giving you a reason to come back. So that does not fulfill God's request, and so he asks Moses to again stretch out his hand and cause the locusts to happen. And so we see that happen, and they're there for a time. Pharaoh asks them to take it away. So a wind comes through and drives the locusts into the Red Sea, and Pharaoh immediately hardens his heart again. And we're back to square one. And then this ninth plague happens. And the ninth plague is another one of those that kind of I almost want to say, almost don't want to say disproves, but it kind of works against this idea that the duration of all the plagues. Now I know we may have hit on this a little bit last week. I know there are some theories out there that say there was one plague that happened, it was one plague after another each for a day, and then it would happen. The next one would happen, and the next one would happen. Then there's other theories that go all the way up to each plague happened for a month of the year, which helps us lead up to what we will see in chapter 11 when God institutes the new calendar for the Jewish people. But the first plague and the ninth plague kind of help to work against well, not help, but though they kind of work a little bit against that theory. Whereas we see with the first plague was for 7 days. That's when the water in the Nile was turned to blood. And then you see here with the 9th plague, as we see, beginning in verse 21. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt. Have you ever been someplace where it's been so dark you could almost feel it? I think the only time I've ever been someplace is we went to visit Mammoth Cave, and they take you down way deep into that bottom chamber and they turn all the lights off. And it's literally like it's crawling on you. That's a darkness that I would not want to experience for long. Wally?
Years ago when I was in the Guard, I went to jungle training down in Panama. And at night, when you're going down into the jungle, you cannot even see your hand right close to your face. So that reminds me of the darkness that the God did. And then you wonder what's there, who's next to me, those kind of things. With this darkness, I'd be scared, really, I would.
Right. And every time I read about this, I can't help but think about when Christ was crucified. When it was, what was the time period? 3 hours? 3 hours God causes darkness over the earth. And I can't help but think that this was the type of darkness that he put on the face of the earth at that time. It was a darkness to be felt. But nevertheless, Moses stretches out his hand, and there's pitch darkness in the land of Egypt. And then it says it was all over the land of Egypt for 3 days. So here again, we have a plague that we're given a duration for. And this kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Wally. Verse 23, they did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they lived. So in Egypt, all these people that are experiencing this intense darkness, they didn't leave their houses for 3 days. Whereas the children of Israel had light. And that makes me really curious as to what that looked like. Because the lands are adjacent to each other. There would have had to have been some wall where it's just like a border or something, where it's just like darkness. That would be surreal to see. Did someone? Oh, Melissa.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about how Pharaoh says that he's sorry and he's sinned against God and God's the true God and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, okay, clearly he doesn't mean it, because he goes back and he does the same thing. And I'm like, oh, well, in the New Testament it says forgive 7 times 70, and we have a hard time because we're like, well, what if they don't mean it? I'm like, oh, well, God forgave him. And then that leads me to wonder, did God forgive him? Or was he just removing it as part of the plan?
It's a good question. I mean, part of me would be inclined to say if he truly came to accept who God was and understand what God was trying to teach him, then maybe, then I would assume so, but I want to tread lightly on that. I know that he didn't live very long after the plagues happened, because I believe he is killed when the Red Sea comes back together. He's swallowed up with that. So I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on that at all? It's a good question. Dad? Oh, sorry, Lewis, go ahead, and then Dad.
I read a note here about the fact that one of their chief deities among the Egyptians was Ra, the sun god. The sandstorm, this stuff's happened before with them, but it wasn't 3 days. And this is almost noted there. this is an insult that the Ra, the God they look to, couldn't do a thing about this and show God's authority again.
Yes, absolutely. It's right in the face of that. Dad?
Yeah, I wonder a little bit of how much there was a real connection here between Pharaoh and God in this moment, other than a formality. Because, you know, the fact that he uses the phrase, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you, therefore forgive my sin, and please only this once, and plead with the Lord your God. So, you know, for somebody like Pharaoh or these people who believed in multiple gods, and, you know, each nation or other people had their own gods, you know, it was like, well, I'm not sure that there was how much of a connection there was, but it was something that he felt like, I recognize that you people have a God, and I need to somehow plead for help from your God to get myself out of trouble. You know, I don't know how much of a real connection there is, but the fact that he recognized it must be your God, and I need to figure out how to be right with your God.
Okay. I think that might be a good way to look at it. Robert?
But looking at the facts, Pharaoh has not made a covenant with God. He's not making sacrifices to God, and he's not seeking salvation. He just wants the plagues to stop. Moses has an intercessory prayer for him and alleviates his pain. We do that all the time. We pray for people that their pain might be relieved. That doesn't save their soul. That just maybe stops the pain if God wills it. So there's nothing in here about his salvation or forgiveness. He's not under the law of liberty or under Christ. He would live under the Old Testament covenant, and he's not made that covenant. So I don't think there's any forgiveness. I think there's a relieving of pain, and that's it. Now, if Pharaoh had converted to Judaism, that'd be a different story.
Both good points. Does that help answer the question at least, maybe? Okay. All right. Any other comments on that idea? Oh, Jessica.
I just had one more to go along with, like Melissa's questions. I also feel like God is always, he always is true to his word. And so, you know, when he says something, it happens. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. And so even if he knows Pharaoh's heart and he knows that Pharaoh's just saying this to get it to stop, God still follows through with his part, showing his nature, and that, you know, he is a God of his word and can do whatever he wants. But if he says he's going to do something, he does it, opposed to Pharaoh, who continues to say he's going to do something and doesn't.
Mm-hmm. That's also something to consider. Good point. Thank you. All right. Chapter 11. Woohoo! No, something, before we actually physically get into chapter 11, something interesting that happens at the end of chapter 10. It says, so Pharaoh calls Moses in and says, go serve the Lord. And he makes his third compromise, where he says, all right, all your people can go, but you got to leave your livestock and flocks here. And Moses says, you have to let us take our livestock with us, because that's where we're going to get our burnt sacrifices from, is from our livestock. So you have to allow us to take those with us. But then, verse 27, it says, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he would not let them go. And then in verse 28, it says, then Pharaoh said to him, get away from me, take care to never see my face again, for on the day you see my face, you shall die. Verse 29, Moses says, as you say, I will not see your face again. So, and the reason I say this is interesting is because of what chapter 11 is. Now, chapter 11, as we get into it, it begins with God giving Moses instruction on one more plague, and that plague being, as we know, the death of the firstborn. Now, there is a lot of thought here because it seems kind of out of place. But we've seen a pattern in that in the Old Testament previously, where there's a description, a more detailed description given later on for an event that's already happened. So the idea here is that chapter 11 is kind of at least the first part through verse 8 is what you would call, I think one of the commentaries that I read called it a parenthesis. So it's a more detailed description of something that has already happened, that's been put in a different spot. And mainly it's just for organization purposes, so that we can see the description of the final plague here. But where this kind of fits in is, if we go back and look, most likely this fits in between, chapter 11 would fit in between verses 27 and 28 of chapter 10. Because verses 4 through 8 is Moses speaking with Pharaoh. Because as you see at the end of verse 8, it says, and all these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, get out, you and all your people who follow you. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in hot anger. So if everything's in chronological order, you would think that he's been before Pharaoh again. Well, he's obviously not dead, because Pharaoh said, if you appear before me, you're going to die. So if you think about it that way, then that makes verse 29 sound make a little bit more sense. Because Pharaoh's already said that he's not going to let them go. But then all of a sudden we see Pharaoh say, get out, I don't ever want to see your face again. So verses 4 through 8, if you inject those in between verses 27 and 28, that may help a little bit more with the organization of that. Where verses 1 through 3 is God giving Moses that instruction, and I don't really know when that happened. But we lump it all here to see that in solidarity. Any comments or questions on just that? We're going to read through this a little bit more, but okay. All right, so, okay, we got like 2 minutes. I got into chapter 11. Let's see, what time is it actually? All right, I got less than a minute. So we will start. There's a couple things I do want to bring out in chapter 11. Oh, Vernon's got a comment. All right, perfect way to end.
Is it possible that they had that discussion before he left is that what you're saying?
Yes.
While he was still there, they had that discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
So Pharaoh calls him back in after the plague of darkness and says, please take this. You guys can go sacrifice to the Lord, but you got to leave your flocks and herds. Moses says no. Then Pharaoh says, I'm not going to let you go. And then Moses says, well, then there's one more plague coming.
So God kind of interjected something in there to Moses so that he would be ready to talk.
Yes, somewhere.
Maybe
yeah.
an instantaneous thing or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, that's kind of my thought. And kind of what I was reading also. All right. That's time. Thank you all very much. We'll continue in chapter 11 next week.
We're going to sing page 202, Beyond This Land of Parting. Beyond this land of parting, losing and leaving, far beyond the losses darkening this, and far beyond the taking and the bereaving, lies a summer land of bliss, land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is His light, oh, happy summer land of bliss, beyond this land of toiling, sowing and reaping, far beyond the shadow darkening this, and far beyond the sighing, moaning and weeping, lies the summer land of bliss, land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is right, oh, happy summer land of bliss, beyond this land of waiting, seeking and sighing, far beyond the sorrow darkening this, and far beyond the pain and sickness and dying, lies the summer land of bliss, land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is its light, oh, happy summer land of bliss.
Good evening. So I was, there's a common thought in the Christian world that we are to love ourselves. I've heard it said many times, and I've always thought, well, where is that found? I've never read a commandment for that. And I think I figured out why. You see, we're given two examples. When Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, he then talked about the Samaritan. And so what did the Samaritan do? He bandaged his wounds, took care of him, and paid some money for a room. I thought, okay. So that's an example of love for my neighbor. What's another example of loving somebody as I love myself? See, if we're supposed to love people as we love ourselves, okay, what's another example? Ephesians 5. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. So husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Well, there we go. It's in the form of loving your wife. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. Okay, so nobody hates themselves. Instinctively, we love ourselves, we feed ourselves, we take care of ourselves, we clothe ourselves. I think I know why it's not commanded. It's instinctive. But what's commanded is the way we love ourselves needs to be transferred to others. That's not instinctive. I don't think of that until God told me to. I just thought of taking as much care as I can for myself and then upping it. But no, we don't need to be taught that. We need to be taught that loving ourselves is never more than what we would like done to ourselves, do it to others. And that's it. It's caring for each other's well-being. Paul said, let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. Okay, that adds a little more to it. I shouldn't wait till you are beaten and thrown in a ditch, but maybe preemptively think about what your needs might be. That ups it, right? That makes it a little more on me. Another place, it's written here, but concerning brotherly love, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. And indeed, you do so toward all the brethren who are in all Macedonia, but we urge you, brethren, that you increase more and more. Reminds me of what Paul said in Romans 12. Owe no one anything but to love one another. So that's always what we have to pay. And if we're doing it, Paul here says, you got to increase it. So you got to up your game there. Okay, so I know what I want done for me. That means I know what needs to be done for others. I need to think about it. And now I need to do beyond that. Okay, game gets a little bit more interesting, but that's fine. In Philippians, Paul said, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility of mind, let each one consider others better than himself. Okay, now I got to think you're better than me. Okay, I get that. That's actually not hard for me. But yeah, okay, if I think other people are better than me, that's going to promote respect. And that got me thinking, there's a lot written, a couple places in Proverbs and one in James, and it has to do with being careful about what we say that doesn't cause strife among brothers and sisters. Okay, so now there's things I shouldn't do that are also instinctive, so I have to be told that. Don't gossip. Don't say things that create strife. Don't say things that can lead to personal feelings being hurt. Okay. And then I thought, I see a good example for that. Why I should think of others better than myself. I was thinking about Moses, Aaron, and Miriam in Numbers 12. Now, Miriam got this idea and told it to Aaron that, we're prophets too. It's not just Moses. And so they say to Moses, this idea, okay. Then they said, you married an Ethiopian woman. What's up with that? Now, all the commentators on that are pretty uniform in that there might have been some impropriety. Okay? There might have been. But that didn't give them the right to say anything to him. Why? Because it's funny the way God says, he says, you three get out here. It's like a father listening to the kids in the living room from the bedroom. Get out here. And he got on Miriam and Aaron. He said, look, I speak to Moses face to face. Okay? That should teach you something. He's higher on my list than you are. Now, God's not a respecter of persons, so it's not because Moses looked cooler. It's because there was something qualitatively different about Moses than Aaron and Miriam. And Aaron and Miriam were good people, but something was a cut higher for Moses. And God demonstrated that in his relationship with them. Now, we can't see each other's relationship with God. But if I think more highly of you than I do of me, I'm going to be very careful what I think and say about you, because God may like you more than me. And I don't want to be called out. I mean, really. So with that should really put a little fear in us. Do I really want to think and say bad things in any way about my brother and sister? I'm not supposed to do that anyhow, but God hears that. I don't want to be called out because he may like you more than me. That's just the way it is. We have to look at it that way. We have to presume that from Philippians 2, 3, and 4, that I'm to consider you better than myself. So I was thinking, okay, that's as far as I want to go on thinking about how we love each other. And then I was thinking in Mark, I believe 12, and Jesus talks about the two greatest commandments. And so he says there to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. He repeats all 4 times. I don't see how God could have said it any more emphatically, how much higher our love for him is than for each other. And we have to love each other. 1 John, if we don't love each other, we don't know God. So that goes with it. But we have to love God at such an advanced level, over and above anything else, that we're not going to disobey him in how we treat each other. We're just not. God never said anything like, you got to love your brother more than anything. No, he just said, treat him like you want to be treated. Look out for what he needs, that you'd like somebody to look out for you. Say things that are edifying. Treat him as yourself. We don't treat God as ourself. We worship God with every bit of fiber of being that we have. Can't be increased. I would think that's defined as fanaticism. We should be fanatics for God. Whereas happy, willing slaves, our will is 100% what God's will is. We got to step up to that. Compared to the way we love each other, I'll tell you, what we're told to do and love each other, that's easy compared to really how we have to up it about our Father in heaven. Way more. Jesus said, and I'll close with this, anyone who wants to be my disciple, you have to hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brother, your sister, yes, even your own self. Okay? Jesus, when he said you have to hate them, people say, well, he just means he loves less. No, he could have said that. It's a comparative, it's a juxtaposition for comparison and heightened emphasis. Our love for God, compared to the next thing we love, number 2, is hatred. Hatred. That's how far God is above even those we're supposed to care about. So let us live in the fear of our Lord. Let's make sure that in the love and fear of God, we do the easy stuff, worrying about each other, taking care of each other. And if you'd like to join God's family, come up and get baptized. It doesn't take long. There's no line, no forms to fill out, no Wayne 100 number. And if you've kind of fallen out of favor with God, you should get back in favor right now as we stand and sing.
Let's sing There's a Fountain Free. There's a fountain free, 'tis for you and me. Let us haste, oh haste to its brink. 'Tis the fount of love from the source above, and he bids us all freely drink. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a living stream with a crystal gleam from the throne of life now hear the call that forth freely goes. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a rock that's cleft and no soul is left that may not its pure water share. 'Tis for you and me, and if we might see, let us hasten joyfully there. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain